There's a pair of herons nesting now, and in the last week or so, they've managed to get a good starter nest going. Right now, there's one of the herons is in the nest, and the other one is off hunting or looking for branches to add to the nest. And it's really great. It's a really kind of crappy, windy, rainy day today. I mean, the rain is kind of beautiful, and the heron standing in the rain on the end of the branch is great too. But, you know, standing in the rain, waiting for your partner to return, that's like the beginning of a rom-com movie. So here we are in February, about the middle of February. This will go until about May or June, before the young ones fly away on their own. So many months of this nest, if it survives, many months of this nest ahead, I'm hoping. So. Oh, that was cool. So a big wood stork just flew by. I thought it was going to be another heron, but it wasn't. So we're in the last light of day, and I thought I'd come out here with my camera and just try to record a little more of this heron in this nest building phase. Working with a pretty big stick and adding to the nest. So I'm not an ornithologist, I'm not an expert on birds. I'm learning as much as I can and have been learning for a couple years now. And let's make sure I'm in focus here. Yes, I think so. So if any of you are experts and ornithologists and you see something in my video and you want to point it out to me and educate me a little bit, please feel free to do that. I welcome any comments, especially those that educate me. So please do that. 4 years ago, I recorded herons over a period of months in 2 different nests. It would be really great if this was maybe one of the young ones that I watched make it all the way to maturity and fly away, coming back now to nest in the same trees. That would be awesome. So, a little bit of heron action today. Just some basic nest building, nothing spectacular. I mean, it is spectacular, but. Well, the clouds are gone, and we've actually got a fairly sunny morning, calm winds. It's a little chilly. And as soon as the sun came up and there was enough light, one of them left and started retrieving sticks to work on the nest. There she goes again, or he. It's hard to tell the difference between herons, male and female. The differences are really subtle. The females are just slightly smaller. If I was to take a guess, I would say the female's in the nest right now, and the male is retrieving sticks. One of the things that's really cool that I observed yesterday evening was the herons will fly into the tree that the nest is in, and they'll break branches off to weave them in place. It's actually really cool. They'll just snap the branches right off the tree. And here he comes back with another branch. There we go. I'm going to be checking on this throughout the day today, because this nest building is just not going to stop until they're ready. They're going to do this all day long, back and forth, until the nest is ready and big enough, and to their satisfaction. They're just going to keep going. This is just awesome. The male, I believe, was over on the ground looking for something on the ground, and it found something. It's a little breezy this morning, and another cold front is kind of moving through across the lake. And we had a little bit of rain this morning, and it's a little cloudy, but it's supposed to clear up. And the herons are at it again. They've already started building. I've watched them carry sticks a couple of times this morning while I was drinking my coffee. One of the things I learned 4 years ago is that the heron that's in the nest will give off this kind of telltale sign when the other heron is about to arrive. and they kind of crane their neck up as they spot the heron that's coming in, and that other bird, the partner bird, will come in and do this big wide kind of arc to get to the nest. They never kind of fly directly to it. They do a big loop, almost like an airplane about to land. I would just look for that craning neck and then start my camera so that I wasn't recording, hours and hours of a heron standing in a nest, not doing anything. The male just went right back to the same spot on the ground to find another stick and is going to bring one back in a minute here. It's amazing. There's some really beautiful morning light this morning, and last night we had a full moon, and it's another chilly morning, and the nest building started at sunrise, and the light is just gorgeous right now. Another thing that's different this morning is that there's another heron in the tree, maybe even two other ones, not in this exact tree, but in a nearby tree. And herons tend to nest in the same trees. So you get a group of them building nests, and it's called a heronry. And it would be really great if another nest started to develop. Right now, this other heron is just kind of standing there. But one of the things I think about is, what is the signal? What makes the other heron decide it's time to go get another stick? And they tend to do a lot of physical communication with each other. They poke at each other. They rub against each other. They'll sometimes do this kind of courtship thing where they kind of make it that their necks will make that heart. But it makes me wonder, when does the heron decide to go get another stick? When is the decision made that, that was a good stick, go get another stick? Okay, I'll get another stick. I wish I knew more about how that process worked. Well, that was interesting. I've never seen them do that. There's that craning neck signal, and the male's back with another stick. The other behavior that I noticed 4 years ago is that a lot of times when the partner brings a stick back to the nest, the bird in the nest will kind of do this bow and crane its neck kind of downward, arching its neck back, and it almost looks like a thank you. So we do have some rivalry going on in the other tree, and that's kind of cool to see this morning. Now there's 5 herons in the 2 trees. Herons can get really territorial around mating season, and it's not surprising that they're doing this. These other birds might be thinking about creating a nest, and once they pick a spot, they're gonna push all the rivals out of it. So that was our male from our nest, our guy flying into the tree to chase the other one away. Man, and it's kind of crazy to see all this bird action going on at once this morning. So there does seem to be also a kind of a faster pace to the nesting this morning. Maybe it is a race against the clock. Maybe the male is really feeling the pressure of expanding this nest so that the eggs are safe and comfortable and everything works out at home. I'm going to see if I can shift over and catch him doing his thing. And not to be overly dramatic about it, but this is actually very risky behavior for the male to do, to get himself back into a tree surrounded by branches, to break off a branch and then get out safely and back to the nest without injuring himself is hard to do. And if this bird does injure himself, then that could be the end of the nest completely. And 4 years ago, I did witness that between the 2 nests that I did record, one was successful and the other one collapsed. And I don't know if it was because one of the mates was injured or killed, and then the other one had to try to solo parent, and then abandon the nest just to feed itself, leaving the young that was in the nest vulnerable. I'm not sure what really happened, but the failure of the nest is always a possibility, and a lot of this really does depend on the success of this partnership. And here he comes. And there's that thank you bow that I've seen before. I really love watching that. You have to stop and think about all the activity around here. There are bass boats on the lake, there are cars going by. Later on, the park will be full of kids playing and people playing soccer and people, walking their dogs, and all this is happening almost right under this nest. And for them to stick around, it is going to be kind of a miracle. Herons will abandon the nest completely if the human activity is too much. And in the past, I've had people ask me things like, well, wouldn't it be cool if you could get a drone and fly up there and look at the nest from that perspective? And I think that would be awesome. It would probably make them leave the nest completely. And there's the other problem around here at the lake. We're real close to the airport. Can't have a drone around here easily. So, no, that's a no. The more we disturb these animals, the less likely they are to hang around. They just go somewhere else where they're not disturbed. So for things to be working and these herons to be sticking around, it's really, really remarkable. And I cannot stress that enough. This is truly an amazing thing to see. A couple of days ago, we had a really vicious kind of thunderstorm roll through and come across the lake, and it produced hail and gusts in the 40 to 50 mile an hour range and some very heavy rain. And I was out here recording up until the point where my wife said, please come inside. And all through that rainstorm, from the safety of my house, I watched that nest go up and down with that heron in it in this driving rain and being pelted by hail. It was so wet out here, there was not one dry spot that I could come out here with a camera and try to record any of it. I had to wait till it let up, but it rained pretty hard. Got some great video of a mockingbird, and that was really cool. So I do think we're in the incubation period. There are some things that I've learned about great blue herons and tried to figure out about them during this kind of nesting part of their life. And I did learn that if there are eggs in the nest and they're being incubated, she's going to do that for almost a month. The mortality rate for young great blue herons is about 50%. If we get young herons in the nest and they get to maturity and they get to fly away, awesome, because there's a 50-50 chance that they won't survive it at all. And that's pretty amazing. I don't think I would do this story justice if I didn't talk about the tree that this bird selected for its nest. This is an Australian pine tree. They are widespread in South Florida and throughout the Caribbean. In Florida, they're considered an invasive species and they are removed. I think it's interesting and positive that the Parks Department decided to leave these trees when they removed all of the other invasive Australian pines. Maybe because they knew that nesting was a frequent occurrence in these trees. That would be great. If you're going to remove invasive species, invasive trees, you should be planting the trees that should be here. For every one tree you take out, you should be planting 2. And I'd like to throw that out as a challenge to the Parks Department. Let's reforest Lake Osborne. Let's reforest this suburban area. If you need help getting trees, ask the neighborhood. I'm sure we could contribute money or donate trees to add more to the shores of the lake. More trees is more shade. More trees is more picturesque scenery. And more trees means more birds. And when people walk the path of this lake and they hear the bird sounds and they see the great blue heron making a nest right near the park where their kids play. That's a positive thing. And we could help that along by being better stewards of the natural environment. Capturing the last light of day on what has been a really interesting day watching the heron nest. There's not a lot of activity right now. I haven't seen the mate in a long time. But what I did see this morning on this kind of cloudy start to the day was just as the sun came up, the heron stood up in the nest and began preening in this gorgeous sunlight. And while it was preening, pulled out a feather and then began to play with it, tossing it up in the air and striking at it repeatedly, and then finally letting it go. Most birds will spend several hours a day preening their feathers, removing parasites and keeping their feathers in the best condition possible. And she is no exception. I've seen herons target practice before. I've seen them strike at objects before. I've seen young herons strike at an inanimate object to sharpen their hunting skills. And I've seen young herons in the nest strike at branches nearby to work on those innate hunting skills. I've also seen a great white egret snatch something below the surface, pull it out, and then drop it again to snatch it again. So sometimes when you're watching birds, you get handed a gift. And that was mine today. Amazing. So we're coming into the end of March, the last week of March, and I do think that we might be in the home stretch as far as incubation goes. I have not seen two herons in the nest in a while, but I was traveling last week and I wasn't around. And there has been one heron in the nest constantly. I would love to know if the heron is rolling the egg at all with its beak, turning it in any way, or if it just stays in one spot. I'd love to know if there was more than one egg. There usually is. We had some heavy, heavy rain last night, and I was thinking about this nest while I was watching a movie, all dry and cozy on my couch. So we've got maybe the female, maybe the male. The resident heron in the nest right now is doing some repair work. Did a little preening this morning, but just torrential rain last night and some decent wind too. And we're going to get a little more today. So if great blue herons do complain, I'd love to hear what that sounds like. Hopefully it dries out a little bit so this heron can get a little more comfortable. And I do hope to see its mate return soon. Well, the light right now is not ideal, but it's been a really great day. The wait is over. This morning I glanced up and there was a chick in the nest, and yay. And then, it's Easter Sunday, so we went and visited family. I came back this afternoon, glanced up, another chick in the nest. So it looks like we have two. I can see their little heads moving around whenever the heron in the nest stands up, and this is just great. The heron in the nest did a lot of repair and then did a lot of eating. I managed to see it swallow a rat, what looked like this afternoon a baby iguana, not sure. And that all leaves me with the question of where the food come from. What I haven't seen today is the shift change. If there's chicks in the nest, and there are, then there will be a heron in the nest 24/7. And if there's food in the nest, and there was today, then that food's got to come from somewhere. And it's probably coming from another heron. So what I have missed, just because I've been unlucky, is the food delivery and the shift change. The eggs are finally hatched. So I'm super excited to show you more. And I will be doing that as much as I can. So based on what I can see right now, I'm going to take a wild guess and say that this heron is cooling itself off. The kind of the wings folded out in this kind of display is to increase the surface area and to allow heat to escape. And you can also see the neck pouch is flapping. Gular flapping is what that's called. Gular flapping is an activity that helps cool them off because there's a lot of blood vessels in that pouch in their neck. And when they vibrate it and flap it, they actually cool themselves down by just creating a lot of airflow over those blood vessels. So it's actually really cool to see this all of a sudden today. And they really are kind of awkward looking when they do this wing display thing. It's not normal to see them in that position, so it's different. One thing I have seen is in the heat of the day, I've seen a heron in the nest actually prop its wing out to shade the young from the sun. The white egret just flew right past the camera, and planes are taking off and cars are going by and people are walking, and this heron is just doing its heron thing. I feel blessed to be able to witness this, to be honest with you. Well, so I did finally get to see the shift change that I had been talking about this morning, getting my camera set up, and I just missed the arriving heron, but managed to record the two of them in the nest for a brief moment before the heron that had been there all night flew off to feed. Just when that happened, there was a rival heron that kind of came by and landed on the bank nearby. And when the departing heron left, it made this big arcing turn and then came down and swooped down to the bank and squawked and chased the other heron off, which was pretty cool to see. The arriving heron, who had been out all night, was trying to find a place to sit down and lay down in the nest. And because there's two chicks in the nest now, the house is kind of small. And it had a tough time finding a place to get settled, and wandered around a little bit in circles trying to figure out how to lay down without smushing these two little chicks that are in there. Made me think of times that we've been camping with our kids and all trying to settle into a tiny tent somewhere. Big drama this morning watching the heron nest, but I managed to catch some of it. Well, it's a beautiful morning this morning. Another fantastic Florida day. Cool temperatures, no wind whatsoever. And I do think that I missed the change out between these herons. Oh, maybe not. Okay, here we go. Awesome. The change out between the herons happens early in the morning and in the evening. And now this one's going to leave and go hunt. Probably this heron's been in the nest all night. And the one that just arrived has probably been out all night hunting, or at least a little bit this morning hunting, and will probably have food stored in their stomach that they can regurgitate out for the chicks in the nest. And we'll know if the chicks are sticking their heads up, if it might be close to feeding time. So yeah, there they go. So the little chicks are sticking their heads up. They know that it's breakfast time, and this heron is probably going to regurgitate something into the nest that they can peck at. These chicks are growing really fast. A couple of days ago, they could barely get their heads up. Now you can really clearly see them sticking up their heads. They even look a little bigger. That's really wild to see, only after a few days. It's actually only been, 6 days since I noticed the first chick in the nest, and already they seem about twice as big to me, or maybe 50% bigger. Just really cool. These two little chicks are gonna develop quickly, and in about 2 months, which would be roughly the end of May, they should be ready to fly. They should be fully fledged and ready to fly. For now, man, they're really active. For now, they are totally dependent on these adult herons to take care of them. Once the young herons leave the nest, they are mobile and they can practice hunting, but they're not very good at it. And so they still, for a time, are fed by the adults. And then at one point it stops and the adult herons leave and go off and live their lives, and the young ones have to fend for themselves. But this is really great. The light's great and the chicks are active, and I got to see that happen this morning. So I'm checking in on the herons. It's been about 11 or 12 days since they hatched. They've grown quite a bit, and there are two still, which is good news. For a while I thought maybe one of them was gone, had died or was snatched by something, but there's two still there. Usually what happens in these heron nests that have two babies is that, from what I've seen, is one will kind of become a little bit more dominant, be a little bit bigger in size, will grow a little faster, and then the other one is a little bit more of a runt and kind of has to catch up. And that's kind of what I'm seeing here. One of the chicks is really developed and is walking around and moving a lot. The other one still seems like it's behind a little bit. Just got to see the adult come back to the nest with, I think, maybe a snake or part of a snake, and let the little ones play with it a little bit. It's too big for them to eat, but by allowing them to kind of play with it and tug on it and try to grab it and try to peck at it, they're learning those valuable kind of skills that they're going to need pretty soon. So the snake goes back in the adult heron's stomach, into the acid of the stomach for a little more brewing, which is gross, and then to make it a little more digestible, and then it will come back out and back into the nest so that the little ones can kind of peck at it and try to eat it again. And that's kind of how it works. And I got to see that today, which is cool. As nasty as it is, it's actually really cool to watch. Yesterday when I came home, I actually looked up there and thought that there were no adults in the nest at all. I thought the nest was completely empty. I didn't think there were any chicks in the nest. So I got my binoculars and I walked over there and I got as close as I could get and looked, and I really couldn't see anything. And I thought, okay, that's it. The nest is over. Everybody's gone. And then shortly after that, an adult showed up and the chicks popped their little heads up and they were really active. And so that led me to another series of questions. In my previous experience, there was always an adult heron in the nest when there were chicks. Now it seems like the adult that's in the nest is leaving the chicks periodically to go hunt. I haven't seen this before. The chicks are still vulnerable, and they are vulnerable to attack from hawks and owls, and this may mean that the bond between the two herons is not that great, and they may have, that bond may be broken. One of them may have just left, I don't want to be part of this anymore, and left one to do it by itself. I did see that before, 4 years ago, and that nest did not survive. There's only been one time this week where I actually caught a glimpse of two herons in the nest at the same time, but it was only for just moments, and then one of them left. Not really sure. I'm eager to learn, but I'm also a little worried about whether this nest is going to make it or not. So it's another fantastic spring morning with this kind of like late cold front. It's chilly out this morning, breezy wind out of the northwest, and I'm just now seeing the heron that was in the nest overnight was kind of on top of the chicks to keep them warm, and is now standing up in this just beautiful morning light that we have here. And the chicks are hungry and they're vocal, and they make this funny sound when they're hungry. It sounds like an old car trying to start, And I have a recording of it from the Macaulay Library. I'll just play that for you real quick here. This is what it sounds like. I'll try to get my own recordings closer to the nest in the coming days as they get bigger, because it's really kind of a funny sound. I really like hearing it. It makes me smile. The resident heron has left the nest and is off hunting. And this isn't an easy thing. This isn't something like they can just, like we do, go around to the corner store and get something to eat. This heron's got to go find food, stalk it, kill it, swallow it, and then bring it back. And, if it's a very fortunate and productive morning, 20, 30 minutes, could take a couple hours. Really don't know. So these young are just going to wait. So if I want to get video of that, I got to wait too. And I'll wait until I get hungry. And then I'll just go inside and get something to eat. And it won't take me an hour. We're now finishing up the third week of April, and it does appear to me that there is only one adult heron watching over this nest that is leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back out of necessity. And then there's also the possibility that I'm observing now in the last couple of days that there's only one young heron in the nest. It's very vulnerable when it's alone in the nest. And at one point, I don't know when, we did lose the other young heron. I have not seen it. And that's disappointing to tell you. The young one that's in the nest has grown quite a bit and has probably made that transition from chick to fledgling. The feathers have kind of filled out, and now it has like a complete suit. And it's just going to continue to grow over the next month or so, a couple months, before it is ready to try to learn how to fly. It does raise the possibility that this nest might not make it. So we're just going to keep watching, and we're just going to keep hoping that things work out, and that this nest makes it, and this young heron makes it to maturity and gets to leave on its own power. Well, it certainly has been an interesting morning. I got up with a sense of dread because I had not seen an adult in the nest in some time. The last interaction that I recorded was about a week ago. I recorded for almost 4 hours yesterday, watching the nest off and on. I took a look at the nest last night in the moonlight with my binoculars, and then this morning, no adult. And so I started to get this really awful feeling that this fledgling would die of starvation, marooned in this tiny life raft up on a branch. And I was trying to figure out what to do next. And then all of a sudden, the adult shows up, feeds the fledgling, and I managed to get my camera set up and catch the last bit of that interaction before the adult flew away. And now there's hope. So I'm going to keep watching, and I'm going to keep hoping that things work out. There still is a high chance that this will not work. The one thing that you have to consider is that the adult has to feed itself. And if the burden of doing that and feeding this young fledgling is more than it can handle, it may abandon this task and not continue to feed the fledgling for its own survival. And I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that this works. This is May 1st. We've got about a month to go, I think, before this young heron is ready to fly on its own. But it will still be dependent on the adult for some time after that. It won't know how to hunt. It'll have to learn, and it'll be bad at it. I managed to see this young heron up and walking around and flapping its wings and practice striking on nearby branches, and this is really great. And then I managed to capture a feeding. The adult has been coming and going. Last night before I went to bed, a little before 10, I checked on the nest with my binoculars and managed to see a feeding at that time. This young heron is big and is now a formidable opponent if it comes under attack from an owl or a hawk. It is going to have a better chance of fighting back and staving off that attack. So that's a good thing. Man, there's probably 500 cars that have gone by this morning in the last half hour. It's rush hour, and everybody's using my neighborhood as a cut through because there's some construction, and you don't need to know all that, but if you're hearing a lot of car noise, man, it's like a freeway around here. Anyway, once again, for those of you following along, and there are thousands of you that have been following and watching, thank you. Things look pretty good. Really good. Sometimes I wish I didn't belong to the world of humans and that I could watch this nest all the time, because I'm sure there are some crazy things that happen in that nest that I miss because I'm not watching it all the time. The other day, I just happened to glance out the window at the end of the day and saw a bunch of commotion in the nest, and then grabbed my binoculars and saw that the fledgling heron was trying to swallow something that looked like it was too big to get down. I ran and got my camera, set it up in this really contrasty late afternoon light. The young fledgling heron was trying to swallow a snake that was too big for its body, and the last part of the snake was hanging out of its mouth, and it couldn't get it down. And this went on for probably 8 minutes or so. The adult kind of paced back and forth, waiting for this young one to finish swallowing it all the way. At one point, the adult pulled it out and then let it take it back in again. And then I think it did it a second time. And then, almost as if it realized that this little heron was not going to be able to get this all the way down, reached around, grabbed it by the tail, and pulled it out of the little heron's body. Then there was a little bit of tug of war between the adult and the little one, who still wanted to eat it. And the adult heron used its beak to turn the snake around so that it was head first, and then swallowed it whole. After a few minutes, it left. I'm assuming to go get some food that wasn't so big. Crazy. It's been a good couple of weeks since I posted anything about this heron, and I wanted to kind of bring everybody up to date. This young heron, male or female, I'm not really sure, is actually doing pretty well and is being fed on a regular basis and is growing tremendously, is a very big young heron. Its flight feathers are coming in. Its kind of goofy fledgling hairdo is pretty much gone, and it's now standing up a lot, walking around a lot, practice striking. A couple of times I watched it kind of get itself ready like a toddler and then do a hop from one side of the nest to the other. One thing that I did want to point out, and some of you may have already noticed this, from the time this young heron was able to stand up in the nest, and I can actually see its whole body, I've noticed that its right wing was slightly malformed, and when it tucks its wings in, the tip of that right wing kind of flips out and stays that way. I don't know if this is a congenital birth defect or if this is an injury sustained while it was a hatchling in the nest. No way for me to know. And it does pose some questions. Will this bird be able to fly normally? Will it be able to leave the nest like it's supposed to? I'm not sure, and we're going to have to wait and see. This young adolescent heron in the nest is experiencing the same thing that teenagers experience when they're too young to drive. He can't fly yet, so he's in the nest day after day, waiting to be fed, bored out of his mind probably. I don't know. Do birds get bored? Maybe. But I was recording him the other day, and this big thunderstorm boiled up across the lake and started to really kind of come in fast and hard. And, the red warnings were flashing on the television, and the wind was picking up, and I recorded this heron on the edge of the nest at one point with his wings out, kind of riding the branch up and down, and then he just stood there with his nose in this wind. It really kind of grew to about, 25, 30 mile an hour wind gusts, maybe more. Lightning cracking everywhere, and then the rain started hard, and at that point he tucked in his wings and he turned his back to the storm, as if to say like, no, this isn't going to be fun. And it was just great to see that this little heron is now growing up into a young, strong, bold, brave heron with this wing imperfection that it's got. Like I always say, I'm so privileged to be able to watch this happen. Well, it's a holiday weekend, and I've had an opportunity to watch the heron a lot so far. You can hear that we got some reggae out in the park this morning. There's some people fishing. There's planes taking off. It's going to be another beautiful but hot Florida day. I've been out since before sunrise, watching the heron, hoping to capture a feeding. And those have gotten harder and harder to do because I just have to be in the right place at the right time. Yesterday, though, I managed to catch a feeding interaction between the adult and the young one. And I also captured at the same time of some very aggressive behavior from a crow who repeatedly dive bombed the nest to get at the adult. Crows are opportunistic and they can be kleptoparasitic, where they will steal food when they get a chance, sometimes working as a team. I have previously witnessed a murder of crows on a couple occasions, try to steal a fish from an osprey. I don't think this was the case. I think this crow was out for revenge, and there is some offense by the adult heron. I don't know what it was. It might be possible that the adult heron raided a crow's nest and swiped some babies to feed to its baby. I don't know, but I do think it's interesting, and I'm going to be thinking about this one for a while. Just like that, the story ends. Did it fly away? Up until today, that heron has been in the nest and testing its strength and hopping around and extending its range on the branch, going farther away from the nest. And this morning, in this rainy weather that we're having, I got up and I went to work and I looked up there and I saw that bird standing in the nest. And it was just another one of those days where I didn't want to go to work and I wanted to sit on my front porch with my camera and try to record that bird's first flight. And it didn't happen that way. And when I got home, the nest is empty and I can only speculate now. I did walk over to the lake and walk around underneath the tree and along the shoreline a little bit to see if it was maybe standing around or... So I can only assume that it safely got somewhere and is off being tended to by its adult caretaker, and everything went fine. And when I returned to my canoe and recording wildlife from my canoe, like I usually do, I have a really strong feeling I'm going to run into this little bird with its distinctive wing, and I'll be able to continue the story for you. And I feel pretty good about that. I think that's going to happen. So until then, thanks for following along. I really appreciate the support, and I know that little heron appreciates the support too. How could it not feel the support and all the positive vibrations everyone's sending it? Man, there's a lot of traffic. Yeah. Every good story deserves a plot twist, right? Well, here's this one. Shortly after recording my closing statements for this heron nest adventure that we've all been on, my wife and I were headed out to dinner. It was getting dark, walked down the driveway, and that young bird was standing on my roof right over my head. Truth. And we startled it, and it hopped off my roof onto my neighbor's roof, and then on the ground, and then across his yard and across the street, and almost got hit by a car, and then over by the lake. And I grabbed my phone and walked over in the rain and just to get some kind of video of this youngster as it awkwardly moved through its new landscape. And then the next day, there it was, standing on the bank, waiting to be fed. And then this morning, while I was debating whether to go out on the lake in the canoe and resume my wildlife recording duties, I walked down my driveway, and that bird is back in the nest, expecting to be fed at home. I never expected this to happen at all. So right now, the youngster's in the nest and the adult's over there on the bank, and I don't know what's going to happen. But it does establish one thing that should give us all a sense of relief. This young bird can fly, because it is no small feat to get from the ground up to that nest and into it successfully. It also tells me that this story isn't over. So all I can say to you is you might want to stay tuned. Well, the house wasn't empty for very long, and someone else is moving in. If you've been following along with the Great Blue Heron nest story and are kind of missing it, well, the story may continue with the same location and the same storyline, potentially, but different characters. If you had told me that this Great Blue Heron nest would be occupied again, I would say, sure, yeah, by another set of Great Blue Herons. It's common. The nests are kind of passed along and reused. But this time, it's not a Great Blue Heron, it's an osprey. A friend of mine texted me while I was out of town and said, hey, there's an osprey in the heron nest. And I didn't really think that it would be in the nest a lot, but here it is, possibly adding to it and guarding it against a couple of crows who are hanging around, assuming that whenever the osprey comes back to the nest, that there'd be a fish there. This osprey is close by, is marking the nest as its own, and will probably add to it. I personally don't believe in coincidences, and the fact that this osprey is possibly sizing up the heron nest as its new home is miraculous and amazing and probably meant to be. Will we have baby ospreys in a few months? Man, how cool would that be? So, here we go again.